It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Kids fighting at school, there's nothing new here. What is new is that kids are organising it, they're recording it, and then they're putting it on social media so that they can get more likes, so they can get more followers. This stuff is scandalous and outrageous, and that's what sells on social media.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Hello, this is Justin and Kylie. We are so excited for a brand new idea on the podcast. We've never done this before. Don't know if we'll ever do it again either, but we're going to try it out today. Hopefully you like it. I'm going to tell you all about what we're doing in just a sec, but first, a big announcement. It's Kylie's birthday today. Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
And everyone around the world is let down by your big announcement.
I'm so sorry. I'm so excited. It's your birthday. We're going to finish the podcast, going to spend some time together, have a picnic. I'm not saying where we're going or what we're doing, but we're going to have a really nice day while the kids are at school. It's going to be good. So happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's introduce our brand new idea. Actually, just before I do, in this podcast episode today, in the latter half of it, just a quick content warning. There will be some brief discussion of suicide. If this is something that triggers you or you have sensitivities around the topic, we just wanted to give you a heads up and let you know. Similarly, if you have young children and you're a bit uncomfortable with it, we just wanted to let you know ahead of time. So the idea for today's podcast is really simple. I feel like I need to put on my radio voice for this. Are you ready? This week in parenting. Let me try that again. That was so bad. This week in parenting on the Happy Families podcast. So we've got 4 parenting stories, 4 things that have been in the news that relate to children, families, parenting, and just stuff that we as parents would have an opinion about. Just before we share the first story, which Kylie is going to introduce to us in just a tick, I want to highlight there's no parent shaming here, but we are going to highlight when things are going right and when things are going wrong, things that can be improved on. This is for constructive development. It's not for shaming, okay? But every now and again, we are going to call someone out for doing things that are not in their children's best interest. What's our first story?
Well, recently Wollongong actually hosted the world's road cycling championships. Did I get it right?
Yeah, it was a big deal, and I wasn't there, and let's not talk about that. Let's just stay with the cycling because I'm going to be sad otherwise.
But unfortunately, it made the news for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, let me play something from 7 News.
A Dutch cyclist in Sydney for the Road World Championships has been sensationally arrested. Mathieu van der Poel is accused of punching one teenage girl to the floor and another into a wall after they repeatedly knocked on his door at a Brighton Les Sands hotel. In a bizarre turn of events, Van der Poel actually began today's race before withdrawing at Wollongong. His passport has now been seized and he'll face Sutherland Local Court on Tuesday on assault charges.
So obviously with all news reports, you're going to get a variation of the story in every single publication that you read.
Yeah, I've read like 10 different versions of that story and everyone's saying it a little bit differently.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in what your take is on it.
Okay, here's my hot take. Don't chase or scare or hurt kids. Whether they're yours or someone else's, just don't. So I love cycling. What has happened here is absolutely devastating. This guy, you can imagine, I want to see the world through his frame of reference for a sec. Tomorrow I'm competing for the World Championship. Tomorrow I'm the hot favourite to win the World Championship. It's 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And now there's this 13-year-old and this 15-year-old kid, however old they are, banging on my door, knock and run. Like, I would be furious. I would absolutely be furious. And he did the wrong thing. He absolutely did. If somebody, and I was thinking about it when you and I were talking about it, and my question to you was, if a 30-year-old or 28-year-old guy, athletic, tall, strong, big, built, ran out of his hotel room in his undies and chased our daughters into our hotel room and scared them and potentially physically assaulted them, would I call the cops? And I reckon I would. Like, it's just not okay. Now, should he have been charged? There's a whole lot of other circumstances here that I think are problematic and concerning. From a parenting point of view, I have to ask, where were the parents? And I want to give the parents the benefit of the doubt because every now and again, you and I, with our older children, I'm 13 and 15, that's old enough to live in a hotel room on their own while we go and have dinner or go for a walk along the beach. The parents might have said, kids, stay in the room, do the right thing, we'll be back in half an hour. So that kind of thing is possible, and I want to give the parents the benefit of the doubt, but I've got to ask, where were the parents and what made the kids think this was okay? Because I'll tell you what, if our kids were running up and down a hotel corridor playing knock and run, I would be not the calm, happy Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families kind of guy. I'd be cranky, especially at that hour of the night. Doesn't excuse what Vanderpoel did. There's got to be personal responsibility on both sides, but that's my take on it. He did the wrong thing. I don't know if he should have been charged. I think a good, scary conversation and a reminder this is not okay was probably enough. I think it's devastating what happened from a career point of view as a result of this. But gosh, I mean, parents, kids, a little bit of personal responsibility matters here as well. Both sides performed poorly. Vanderpoel should have just called hotel reception, or he should have called his team. He should have called one of his managers. He should not have taken matters into his own hands, though. And ultimately, I actually, as much as I am at pains to say I don't like this, I have to side with the fact that he did the wrong thing.
As you were talking, the thing that kept jumping out to me was your Justinism of high emotions, low intelligence. His emotions are through the roof and his intelligence has literally gone through the floor, and his response has been completely and utterly inappropriate.
Totally suboptimal. When you're on the brink, make sure you stop and think.
Love it.
Okay, what's the next one?
The next three stories are actually in relation to kids and screens.
Yep.
And just for that trigger warning, one of them will actually deal with suicide.
Okay.
So the first one, Fight Club, has come up a lot in the news in the last few weeks.
Yeah, this is blowing my mind. So we'll link to this in the show notes. First off, a brutal assault on schoolgirls disgusts New Zealand as video circulates on social media. That was the first one. The second one was in the Courier Mail, and I was actually on the Today Show on, I think it was Tuesday morning, or maybe it was Monday morning, talking about this. It was Monday morning on the public holiday. Secret fight clubs igniting violence in Queensland schools. Parents have been warned, according to the Courier Mail, of an underground fight club culture that's infiltrated into Queensland schools, with students using social media to promote violence to gain notoriety. So both the New Zealand story and this one are the same. And there was one last week in the paper about what was happening in Adelaide schools. Golden Grove High School was specifically mentioned. Confronting footage of male and female students involved in public and on-campus brawls with fellow students have emerged on TikTok and Instagram in recent weeks. Some of the video includes students wearing state school uniforms, while other brawls involving young people were filmed at prominent shopping centres and bus stops.
So is this just the news sensationalising a couple of incidences, or is this actually something that seems to be gaining momentum?
So kids fighting at school, or bash you up behind the toilets, that kind of thing, that's always happened.
An age-old story.
Yeah. There's nothing new here. What is new is that kids are organising it. They're showing up, they're pulling out their phones, they're recording it, and then they're putting it on social media so that they can gain status, notoriety, so that they can get more likes, so they can get more followers. This stuff is scandalous and outrageous, and that's what sells on social media. And I don't know that we've got data that can show that there's an increase in it, but I think that it's a really worrying trend, this glorification of violence. A quote here, yells of "get him" and "break his teeth" were captured in the audience of the footage, which prompted the police to launch an investigation. So these stories are just brutal, absolutely awful, terrifying. And if it was your kids, I mean, can you imagine being dragged somewhere with a huge crowd screaming for your blood, having people film it, and then living with the indignity of having it posted throughout the community so everyone gets to see you beaten up? These kids are going to have long-term anxiety challenges. They're going to end up depressed. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of families end up moving to new communities, and this thing can still follow them as well. I think it's absolutely horrendous. And what can we do as parents? Well, we've got to know where our kids are. We've got to know how they're using their social media. The ongoing, never-ending discussion about social media and the way our kids are using it and are affected by it is becoming increasingly intense. And I think the stakes are getting higher.
I think about the conversations that we're having with our children specifically, and you know, they often are rolling their eyes at us like, why do we have to have this conversation? This isn't pertinent to me. It's not a problem. And yet, as parents, we actually can't sit back and hope that they'll work it out by themselves. We actually have to have these kinds of conversations with them and try to pre-arm them to keep them safe.
And really, that's what it's about. It's about cocooning them while they don't have the age or the experience or maturity to deal with it. It's about pre-arming them as they move to an age or a level of maturity, or where they start having these experiences or seeing them happen, pre-arming them and talking to them about what would happen if you were in a situation. What would you do? How would you feel? How can we support you? And ultimately helping them so that they're equipped for if and when this does happen. Hopefully Hopefully it won't happen, but we've got to have these conversations with them.
And I think the only other thing that really stands out to me is I think about, again, just the different challenges we've had with our children over the years is when your child's behaviour starts to change, there's something going on in their world.
Yeah.
And as parents, instead of us getting upset and angry at them for, being insolent or disobedient or any number of things that you could label them with as teenagers, it really is a time for us to get very curious because something is going on in their life that is hurting them.
Worth pausing and acknowledging what the signals are. And this is relevant for our next story as well about Molly Russell. The signs to look out for: your child being more aggressive than normal, your child back chatting,
or being withdrawn,
or your child withdrawing, not wanting to leave their room, being at their screen incessantly, being deceitful and hiding things from you. These are the kinds of things to look out for. And when it comes to things like Fight Club, you want to look for physical signs as well. Like, are they showing up with mud on their face or with torn buttons or a uniform ripped or hair everywhere because they've been in a tussle somewhere? Are they losing things? These are the kinds of signs that you're looking out for if you've got any concerns.
Are they eating dinner with you?
We had somebody just recently who's close to us. I don't know if I even told you about this, whose son, 13, 14 years old, grade 8, grade 9, a bunch of boys in his grade at a state high school in Queensland decided that he was dead. That was their plan. They were going to bash him. They followed him to shopping centres. They followed him on their bikes. They followed him around the schoolyard. They taunted him outside his house and the police had to be called. And eventually they beat up some other kid and they got expelled from their school. But this sort of stuff it doesn't happen much, but when it happens to you or your child, it is nothing short of terrifying. Nothing short of terrifying. So as parents, we need to be aware of this idea of Fight Club, and we've got to have these conversations with our kids and help them to make safe choices.
So story number 3, a UK court has just ruled that social media was partly responsible for the death of a 14-year-old girl by suicide in 2017.
So this is one of these things that keep on coming up, and everyone says when somebody dies by suicide, it's complicated. There are lots and lots of factors. We cannot blame any one thing. My thinking on social media has been evolving very, very quickly just in the last few months. I've typically had the approach that as parents, we just want to teach our kids, let them self-determine, let them self-govern, but make sure we teach them the right principles. That's been my general approach. You want to explore, explain, empower. Increasingly, as I see more and more of what's going on behind the scenes with social media and with gaming, I feel like there's an inner tyrant inside me that just wants to scream, get off, stay away, it's bad. And when you hear a story like this, a judge has actually said, no, this suicide would not have happened unless social media was designed the way it is and doing what it does. I've got a quote here. And what we've got here is Pinterest. So Facebook and Instagram were implicated. Pinterest was as well. Pinterest has apologised for the content it promoted to Molly via email, including, quote, 10 depression pins you might like, and depression recovery, depressed girl, and more pins trending on Pinterest. The way that social media is designed is it keeps feeding you more and more of the outrageous, scandalous stuff that takes you deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole of what you're already looking at. And this poor 14-year-old girl who's already struggling has had social media platforms feeding her content of a concerning nature. Social media, according to news.com.au, and video sharing platforms contain content showing suicidal ideation, self-harm material, and general reflections on depression, according to the UK's National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. A teenager may view that kind of content on top of more mainstream material featuring videos and images of their peers, as well as influencers and models, which may prompt young users to make flawed comparisons between themselves and the material they view online. So in the last month or so, in my presentations, I've been saying to parents, the government needs to do more. The government regulates children's access to alcohol. The government apparently regulates children's access to explicit content online, or not online, but to pornography or to sex clubs. The government regulates children's access to things like tattoos. The government needs to do more. I actually don't think the government cares, but the government needs to do more to keep our kids safe online and to literally get in the faces of these social media platforms and make them safer places for our kids.
It's just so devastating to me to think that there are people out there who are actually more concerned about the money that they can earn from exposing our children to such harmful things. It breaks my heart to think that that's the kind of world we live in. The last story is actually a New York Times piece written by a games designer who has said that he actually refuses to let his children play games because he knows how they're made and why they're made.
This story blew my mind. So the guy's name is William Su. He's the founder of Storm 8 Gaming Company. And in this New York Times piece, he basically says, I don't let my kids play games. And let me share with you a couple of quotes from this article, Kylie, and tell me what you think. He says this: in 2009, I co-founded Storm 8, a video game developer. I have launched more than 50 mobile games. These have been downloaded more than 1 billion times and have generated more than $1 billion in sales. So I don't think that this guy's a try-hard. I think this guy's actually done it. I'm very familiar with game addiction, as that's what I thought about every day for more than a decade. We sold the company in 2020. He says, I hired product managers and engineers to track everything players did and analyze their behavior. Using the data we collected, we experimented with every feature of our games to see which versions allowed us to extract the most time and money from our players. For us, game addiction was by design. It meant success for our business. Let me read 2 more paragraphs really quickly because this is so compelling. He says, here's an example of how addiction is cultivated in gaming. If you have played mobile games like Candy Crush Saga, you're familiar with the concept of lives. You're given 5 lives a day. Each time you lose a game, you lose a life. Run out of lives and you can't play again until your supply is replenished. Why, you might ask, would someone get addicted if the developers prevent players from gaming as much as they like? I've used the same mechanic in my own games, and this is how I explained it to my engineering team. Say I have a delicious chocolate cake. If I give you the entire cake, you might eat the whole thing in one go because it's the best cake you've ever had, but you'll likely overdose and may not want to touch chocolate cake again. What if instead I gave you a tiny slice each day? Gradually you develop a daily habit and you might end up buying 10 cakes from me. That's the ultimate goal, to build habit-forming games that have players coming back every day. In other words, it takes away their ability to make decisions. We wanted people to reach for their phones first thing in the morning and jump right into our games, just as they check their social media and emails. This is from the guy that did it. And he's basically said, I've got 3 and 4-year-old daughters, and I have yet to show them any of the games that I've designed, and I don't want my kids playing games. Like, compelling, right?
Obviously, the enormity of revenue that one is receiving at this end.
Billions of dollars.
And yet I'm looking at, card games like, that have been around forever. There's something that we love to play, get a group of people together and you enjoy, but there's no addiction level to it. And yet it has sustained itself for how many years? Like, how old is What was the...
Oh, yeah, since we were kids. But let's be clear. Not everyone who plays a game, just like not everyone who gets onto social media, is going to experience addiction or the catastrophic outcomes that we saw in the case of Molly Russell. What we do know, though, is that a percentage, and it's a surprisingly high percentage, somewhere between 5 and 10%, depending on which stats you read, of people will form that kind of an addiction. And
across all age groups too, which is astounding, right?
It's enormous. It's enormous. So from a parenting point of view, because we do need to wrap up, this week in parenting, we've gone way too long. A couple of things. First off, parents need to know that this is the intention behind the games, the intention behind the screens, the intention behind the social media, the intention behind everything that's designed digitally. It's designed to have addictive qualities. It's designed to get our attention. If you haven't read the book Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, read it. Just read that book and ask yourself whether or not you really, really have control of your attention and whether your kids do as well. We need to be better gatekeepers.
And when you think about the response that our children have, even some of our friends and adults have when the screen is taken away from them or they're asked to turn it off, it's that withdrawal. You can see it as everybody kind of puts their defenses up and fights for another 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's it. So that's This Week in Parenting. I mean, we could keep on talking, but that's enough for now. If you've got feedback on any of these stories or on the podcast episode itself, we would love to hear about it. Any news stories that you'd like us to discuss as well, you can let us know. Podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. Because of the nature of the way we do the podcast, we may be a little slow reporting back with feedback, but we do want to hear from you and we do want to share your voice. We love your voice memos. We'd love to put them on the podcast as well. So podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. The podcast, as always, produced by Justin Rawlin from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And if you'd like to wish Kylie a happy birthday, podcasts. No, I'm just kidding. Happy birthday, Kylie. Have a wonderful day. And we will be back tomorrow with I'll Do Better Tomorrow on the Happy Families podcast.